I never thought I'd hear my own mother dismiss my entire existence with a single sentence. But there it was, floating through the air like a dagger aimed straight at my chest. "Don't worry about Lydia," she said, her voice dripping with that sugary tone she reserved for important conversations. "She's just here to help us out. You know, like a live-in assistant. Gina's recital is what really matters right now." I froze in place, the coffee mug in my hand trembling slightly. My name is Lydia Carter, and at 25 years old, I've spent most of my life being the glue that holds my family together. But in that moment, I realized I wasn't the glue. I was the invisible tape, useful but disposable. My mother, Vanessa Carter, is a well-known interior designer. She's the kind of woman who can walk into a room and command attention with her perfectly tailored outfits and sharp, confident smile. But behind closed doors, she's a perfectionist who demands control over everything. Then there's Gina, my 15-year-old sister, the golden child. She's a ballet prodigy, or at least that's what my mother has decided. Gina gets private lessons, custom costumes, and endless praise. Meanwhile, I'm the one who drives her to rehearsals, cooks dinner, and makes sure the house doesn't fall apart. And Sophie, my 18-year-old sister, is somewhere in between. She's old enough to see what's happening, but too young to stand up to our mother. She's always been the quiet one, the peacemaker, the one who avoids conflict at all costs. As for me, I'm a freelance graphic designer. I work from home, which my mother sees as an excuse to pile on more responsibilities. "You're here anyway," she'd say with a dismissive wave of her hand. "It's not like you have a real job." But I do have a real job. I've built a small but steady client base, and I've been saving up for years to start my own design studio. It's a dream I've kept hidden, buried under the weight of family obligation. That morning, as I stood in the kitchen, I felt something shift inside me. My mother's words weren't just hurtful, they were a wake-up call. I wasn't just helping out. I was being used. I glanced at the calendar on the fridge. Gina's big recital was in 2 weeks, and the house was already buzzing with preparations. My mother had hired a photographer, a videographer, and even a florist to make sure everything was perfect. But what about me? What about my dreams? I set the coffee mug down and took a deep breath. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to think about what I wanted. And in that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to be invisible anymore. The day dragged on, but my mind was racing. I couldn't shake off the sting of my mother's words. They echoed in my head, replaying like a broken record. Just a helper. It felt like a label I had worn for too long, and I was done with it. That evening, as I prepared dinner, I could hear the faint sound of Gina practicing her ballet routine upstairs. The rhythmic thud of her feet against the wooden floor was a constant reminder of the pressure she was under. I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for her. She was just a kid, yet she was expected to be perfect. As I stirred the pasta sauce, my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text from Sophie. "Are you okay? You seemed upset earlier." I sighed, knowing that Sophie was always the one to notice when something was off. I typed back quickly, "I'm fine, just a long day." But I wasn't fine. I was anything but fine. I was tired of being the one who held everything together while my mother basked in the glory of her perfect family. After dinner, I retreated to my room, seeking solace in the familiar chaos of my art supplies. I had a project due for a client, but my mind was too cluttered to focus. Instead, I pulled out a sketchbook and began to draw. As the pencil glided across the page, I felt a sense of freedom wash over me. I sketched designs for a logo I had been dreaming about for my own studio. Each stroke was a declaration of independence, a reminder that I had talents and aspirations beyond the confines of my family's expectations. But just as I was getting lost in my creativity, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from Aunt Miranda. I hadn't spoken to her in ages, but I remembered her as the one person in the family who had always encouraged me to pursue my dreams. "Hey, Lydia, how are you?" she asked, her voice warm and inviting. "I'm okay, I guess, just busy with family stuff," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "Busy or overwhelmed?" she probed gently. I hesitated, then decided to open up. "Honestly, I feel like I'm just invisible. My mom doesn't see me as anything more than a helper. It's like my dreams don't matter." There was a pause on the other end, and I could almost hear her thinking. "You know, Lydia, you're not just a helper. You're a talented designer with so much potential. Have you thought about what you really want?" Her words struck a chord. I had been so focused on fulfilling my family's needs that I had neglected my own desires. "I want to start my own design studio," I admitted, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "Then why not do it? You have the skills, and I believe in you," she encouraged. "You deserve to chase your dreams." I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. But what if my mom doesn't support me? "Sometimes you have to take a leap of faith, even if it means stepping away from what's comfortable," she replied. "I'll be here to support you, no matter what." After hanging up, I felt a renewed sense of determination. I wasn't going to let my mother's dismissive attitude define me any longer. I needed to take control of my life. The next day, I decided to take a bold step. I reached out to a local community center that offered workshops for aspiring entrepreneurs. I signed up for a course on starting a small business, and for the first time in a long while, I felt excited about something. As the days passed, I immersed myself in the course, learning about business plans, marketing strategies, and networking. I even started to sketch out a logo for my studio, which I decided to call Carter Creations. But with every step I took toward my dreams, I could feel the tension building at home. My mother noticed my newfound enthusiasm and didn't hesitate to voice her disapproval. "Lydia, you're wasting your time with this nonsense. You should be focusing on helping your sisters, especially with Gina's upcoming recital," she snapped one evening as I was working on my business plan at the kitchen table. I felt my heart race. "Mom, I'm doing this for me. I can't keep sacrificing my dreams for everyone else." Her eyes narrowed, and I could see the familiar flicker of anger. "You're being selfish. You're not a child anymore. You need to grow up and take responsibility." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. But this time, I refused to back down. "I am taking responsibility for my own life. I can't keep living in your shadow." The silence that followed was deafening. I could see the shock on her face, and for a moment I thought I might have broken through. But then she turned away, dismissing me as if I were just a child throwing a tantrum. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. I was finally standing up for myself, but I knew the battle was far from over. I had to find a way to break free from my mother's control and reclaim my life. The following week was a whirlwind of emotions. I was juggling my new business course, my freelance projects, and the mounting pressure from my family. Each day felt like a tightrope walk, balancing my dreams against the expectations of my mother and sisters. As Gina's recital approached, the atmosphere at home grew increasingly tense. My mother was in full-on stage mom mode, obsessing over every detail of the performance. I could hear her barking orders at Gina, pushing her to practice harder, to be perfect. It was exhausting to witness, and I felt a pang of sympathy for my sister. One evening, after another grueling rehearsal, I found Gina sitting on the stairs, her head buried in her hands. I sat down beside her, feeling the weight of her frustration. "Hey, you okay?" I asked softly. She looked up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I don't know, Lydia. I just feel so much pressure. Mom wants everything to be perfect, and I'm scared I'll let her down." I wrapped my arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "You're not going to let anyone down. You're amazing just the way you are. You don't have to be perfect." "But Mom doesn't see it that way," she whispered, her voice trembling. I sighed, knowing exactly what she meant. "I get it, but you have to remember that your worth isn't tied to her expectations. You're talented and you deserve to enjoy what you love." Gina nodded, but I could see the doubt still lingering in her eyes. I wished I could do more to help her break free from our mother's grasp. That night, I decided to reach out to Aunt Miranda again. I needed someone who understood the dynamics of our family and could offer guidance. I dialed her number, my heart racing with anticipation. "Lydia, it's so good to hear from you," she said, her voice warm and welcoming. "Hi, Aunt Miranda, I really need to talk," I replied, my voice shaky. "Of course, what's going on?" I took a deep breath and poured out my heart. I told her about the pressure Gina was under, my mother's dismissive attitude, and my desire to start my own design studio. "I feel like I'm fighting a losing battle," I admitted. "Every time I try to stand up for myself, it just makes things worse." Miranda listened intently, her silence encouraging me to continue. "I want to support my sisters, but I also want to pursue my dreams. I don't know how to do both. Lydia, it's important to remember that you can't pour from an empty cup," she said gently. "You have to take care of yourself first. If you're not happy, you won't be able to help anyone else." Her words resonated with me. But what if my mom never accepts my choices? Acceptance may take time, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't pursue what makes you happy. "You deserve to live your life on your own terms," she replied. I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. "You're right. I need to focus on my goals and find a way to support my sisters without losing myself in the process." "Exactly. And remember, I'm here for you. If you ever need help or just someone to talk to, don't hesitate to reach out," she said, her voice filled with warmth. After our conversation, I felt a renewed sense of determination. I was ready to take control of my life, but I also needed to find a way to support Gina and Sophie. The next day, I decided to invite them both out for coffee. I wanted to create a safe space for us to talk about our feelings and the pressures we faced as sisters. We met at a cozy cafe downtown, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. As we settled into a corner booth, I could see the tension in their faces. "Thanks for coming, you guys," I said, trying to lighten the mood. "I thought it would be nice to hang out and talk." Sophie smiled weakly, but Gina looked apprehensive. "Is this about the recital?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded. "I know, it's a big deal, but I want you both to know that it's okay to feel overwhelmed. You don't have to carry the weight of Mom's expectations alone." Gina's eyes widened, and I could see the relief wash over her. "Really? You think so?" "Absolutely. You're both incredible, and I want you to enjoy what you love without feeling like you have to be perfect," I reassured them. Sophie chimed in. "I feel like I'm always stuck in the middle. I want to support both of you, but it's hard when Mom is so demanding." I reached across the table and took their hands. "We're in this together. We can support each other and find a way to break free from Mom's expectations. We deserve to be happy." As we talked, I could see the tension slowly melting away. We shared our fears, our dreams, and our frustrations. It felt liberating to finally voice what we had all been feeling. By the end of our coffee date, I could see a spark of determination in both of my sisters' eyes. "Let's make a pact," I suggested. "We'll support each other in pursuing our passions, no matter what Mom says." Gina nodded enthusiastically. "I want to dance for me, not for her. And I want to explore my own interests without feeling guilty," Sophie added. We all smiled, feeling a sense of unity that had been missing for so long. It was a small step, but it felt monumental. As we left the cafe, I felt a sense of hope blossoming within me. I was no longer alone in this fight. Together, we could challenge our mother's expectations and reclaim our lives. The days leading up to Gina's recital were a blur of rehearsals, last-minute preparations, and mounting tension in our household. My mother was relentless, pushing Gina to practice until her feet were sore and her spirit was nearly broken. I could see the toll it was taking on her, and it broke my heart. One evening, as I was working on my business plan at the kitchen table, I overheard my mother in the living room barking orders at Gina. "You need to be perfect. This is your moment and you can't mess it up." I felt a surge of anger rise within me. How could she not see the pressure she was putting on my sister? I set my laptop aside and walked into the living room, ready to confront my mother. "Mom, can we talk?" I said, my voice steady but firm. She turned to me, her expression a mix of annoyance and surprise. "Not now, Lydia. I'm busy helping Gina prepare for her recital." "I know, but this is important," I insisted. "Fine, what is it?" she snapped, crossing her arms. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "I think you're putting too much pressure on Gina. She's just a kid and she should be enjoying this experience, not feeling like she has to be perfect." My mother's eyes narrowed, and I could see the familiar flicker of anger. "You don't understand what it takes to succeed in this world, Lydia. If she wants to be a dancer, she has to work hard. You should know that by now." I felt my heart race. "But at what cost? You're pushing her to the brink and it's not fair. She deserves to enjoy her passion without feeling like she's going to disappoint you." "Don't you dare lecture me about parenting," she shot back, her voice rising. "You're the one who's wasting your potential by playing around with this silly design business." I felt the sting of her words, but I refused to back down. "This isn't about me. It's about Gina. She needs your support, not your criticism." "Support? You think I'm being critical. I'm trying to prepare her for the real world." "By making her feel like she's not good enough?" I countered, my voice shaking with emotion. The tension in the room was palpable, and I could see the frustration boiling over in my mother's eyes. "You're just jealous because I'm focused on her success and not yours. You've always been the one who hides in the background." It hit me hard. I had spent so long trying to support my family that I had lost sight of my own dreams. "I'm not jealous, Mom. I'm trying to help you see that you're hurting her. You're hurting all of us." Just then, Gina walked into the room, her face pale and her eyes wide. "What's going on?" she asked, glancing between us. "Nothing, sweetie, just a little disagreement," my mother said, her tone suddenly softening. But I could see the fear in Gina's eyes. "I don't want to be a disappointment," she whispered, her voice trembling. I stepped forward, wrapping my arms around her. "You could never be a disappointment, Gina. You're amazing just the way you are." My mother huffed, clearly frustrated. "You're coddling her, Lydia. She needs to toughen up if she wants to succeed." I turned to my mother, my heart racing. "And you need to realize that success isn't just about perfection. It's about passion and joy. You're taking that away from her." The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging in the air. I could see the conflict in my mother's eyes, but she quickly masked it with anger. "You're both being ridiculous. This is how the world works. If you can't handle it, maybe you should both just quit." I felt a surge of frustration. "Maybe you should try listening for once." With that, I stormed out of the room, my heart pounding in my chest. I needed to cool off, to think. I grabbed my jacket and headed out for a walk, the cool night air hitting my face like a splash of cold water. As I walked through the quiet streets, I felt a mix of anger and sadness. I was tired of feeling like I was fighting a losing battle. I wanted to support my sisters, but I also needed to stand up for myself. When I returned home, I found Gina sitting on the stairs again, her head in her hands. I sat down beside her, feeling the weight of the world on both our shoulders. "Hey," I said softly. "I'm sorry about what happened earlier." She looked up, her eyes glistening with tears. "I just want to make Mom proud, but it's so hard." I know, I said, wrapping my arm around her, but you have to remember that your worth isn't tied to her expectations. You're an incredible dancer and you deserve to enjoy it. Gina nodded, but I could see the doubt still lingering in her eyes. What if I mess up? And you mess up, it's not the end of the world. What matters is that you're doing what you love, I reassured her. Just then, Sophie joined us, her expression serious. I overheard you guys arguing with Mom. It's not fair that she puts so much pressure on you, Gina. I just want to be good enough, Gina whispered, her voice breaking. You are good enough, Sophie said firmly. We all are. We need to support each other, no matter what Mom says. I felt a surge of pride for my sisters. Exactly. We're in this together. We can't let her expectations define us. As we sat together on the stairs, I felt a sense of unity forming between us. We were no longer just sisters. We were allies in this fight against our mother's unrealistic expectations. The next day, I decided to take a bold step. I reached out to Aunt Miranda again, asking if she could come over to help us navigate this situation. I knew that having her support would make a difference. When she arrived, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Thank you for coming, Aunt Miranda, I said, leading her into the living room. Of course, Lydia. I'm here for you, she replied, her eyes warm and understanding. I explained the situation, detailing the pressure Gina was under and my mother's dismissive attitude. Miranda listened intently, nodding along as I spoke. I think it's time for a family meeting, she suggested. You all need to express your feelings and set some boundaries. I felt a mix of anxiety and hope. Do you really think that will help? Absolutely. It's important for everyone to understand each other's perspectives, she said confidently. That evening we gathered in the living room. My heart raced as I prepared to confront my mother again, but this time I had my sisters and Aunt Miranda by my side. Mom, we need to talk, I said, my voice steady. She looked up from her phone, her expression wary. About what? About the pressure you're putting on Gina and how it's affecting all of us, I said, glancing at my sisters for support. Gina spoke up, her voice trembling but determined. I want to dance for me, not for you. My mother's eyes widened in surprise and I could see the anger bubbling beneath the surface. You're being ridiculous. This is about her future. No, it's about her happiness, I countered. We're tired of feeling like we have to meet your expectations to be worthy. Sophie added, we need to support each other, not tear each other down. Aunt Miranda chimed in. It's important for you to listen to your daughters, Vanessa. They're expressing their feelings, and it's crucial for their well-being. The room fell silent, the weight of our words hanging in the air. I could see the conflict in my mother's eyes, but she quickly masked it with anger. You're all being selfish. I'm just trying to help you succeed. But at what cost? I asked, my voice rising. You're pushing us away and we're tired of feeling like we're not enough. The tension in the room was palpable, and I could see the frustration boiling over in my mother's eyes. You're all being ridiculous. This is how the world works. If you can't handle it, maybe you should all just quit. I felt a surge of frustration. Maybe you should try listening for once. With that, I stormed out of the room, my heart pounding in my chest. I needed to cool off, to think. I grabbed my jacket and headed out for a walk, the cool night air hitting my face like a splash of cold water. As I walked through the quiet streets, I felt a mix of anger and sadness. I was tired of feeling like I was fighting a losing battle. I wanted to support my sisters, but I also needed to stand up for myself. The day of Gina's recital arrived, and the atmosphere in our house was electric with anticipation. My mother was in full control mode, ensuring every detail was perfect. I could see the stress etched on Gina's face as she practiced her routine for the umpteenth time. I felt a mix of pride and concern for her. She was so talented, yet the pressure was suffocating. As the evening approached, The living room was transformed into a makeshift dressing area with costumes, makeup, and accessories scattered everywhere. I watched as my mother fussed over Gina, adjusting her costume and applying makeup with a precision that felt more like a military operation than a celebration. "Mom, she looks great. Can we just let her breathe for a second?" I interjected, trying to ease the tension. "Lydia, this is important. She needs to look perfect on stage," my mother snapped, her eyes narrowing at me. I felt my frustration boiling over. "It's not about perfection, Mom. It's about enjoying the moment. You're making her feel like she has to be flawless, and that's not fair." "Enough," my mother shouted, her voice echoing in the small space. "You're not the one who's going to be on that stage. You don't understand what it takes to succeed." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. "But I do understand, Mom. I've been in Gina's shoes, and I know how it feels to be suffocated by expectations. You're pushing her away, and I can't stand by and watch it happen." Just then, Gina walked into the room, her eyes wide with fear. "What's going on?" she asked, glancing between us. "Nothing, sweetie, just a little disagreement," my mother said, her tone softening as she turned to Gina. But I could see the fear in Gina's eyes. "I don't want to disappoint you, Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling. I stepped forward, wrapping my arms around her. "You could never disappoint anyone, Gina. You're amazing just the way you are." My mother huffed, clearly frustrated. "You're coddling her, Lydia. She needs to toughen up if she wants to succeed." I turned to my mother, my heart racing. "And you need to realize that success isn't just about perfection. It's about passion and joy. You're taking that away from her." The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging in the air. I could see the conflict in my mother's eyes, but she quickly masked it with anger. "You're both being ridiculous. This is how the world works. If you can't handle it, maybe you should both just quit." I felt a surge of frustration. "Maybe you should try listening for once." With that, I stormed out of the room, my heart pounding in my chest. I needed to cool off, to think. I grabbed my jacket and headed out for a walk, the cool night air hitting my face like a splash of cold water. As I walked through the quiet streets, I felt a mix of anger and sadness. I was tired of feeling like I was fighting a losing battle. I wanted to support my sisters, but I also needed to stand up for myself. When I returned home, I found Gina sitting on the stairs again, her head in her hands. I sat down beside her, feeling the weight of the world on both our shoulders. "Hey," I said softly. "I'm sorry about what happened earlier." She looked up, her eyes glistening with tears. "I just want to make Mom proud, but it's so hard." "I know," I said, wrapping my arm around her. "But you have to remember that your worth isn't tied to her expectations. You're an incredible dancer, and you deserve to enjoy it." Gina nodded, but I could see the doubt still lingering in her eyes. "What if I mess up?" "Then you mess up. It's not the end of the world. What matters is that you're doing what you love," I reassured her. Just then Sophie joined us, her expression serious. "I overheard you guys arguing with Mom. It's not fair that she put so much pressure on you, Gina." "I just want to be good enough," Gina whispered, her voice breaking. "You are good enough," Sophie said firmly. "We all are. We need to support each other, not tear each other down." I felt a surge of pride for my sisters. Exactly. We're in this together. We can't let her expectations define us. As we sat together on the stairs, I felt a sense of unity forming between us. We were no longer just sisters. We were allies in this fight against our mother's unrealistic expectations. The recital was set to begin in just a few hours, and I could feel the tension in the air. I wanted to make sure Gina felt supported, so I suggested we do a little pre-show ritual. "Let's take a moment to breathe and focus on what's important," I said, leading them to the living room. We sat in a circle, holding hands. Let's take a few deep breaths together, I instructed. Inhale and exhale. We repeated this a few times, and I could see the tension slowly melting away. Remember, this is about you, Gina. Just have fun out there, I said, squeezing her hand. As we arrived at the theater, the atmosphere was electric. The lights were dimmed and the audience buzzed with excitement. I could see other parents fussing over their children, but I was determined to keep my focus on Gina. When it was finally time for Gina to perform, I felt a mix of pride and anxiety. She stepped onto the stage, her costume sparkling under the lights. I could see her take a deep breath, and for a moment, everything else faded away. As the music began, I watched in awe as she danced. Each movement was fluid and graceful, and I could see the joy radiating from her. In that moment, I realized that she was doing it for herself, not for our mother. The audience erupted in applause as she finished her routine, and I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. I was so proud of her for finding her voice and expressing herself on stage. After the performance, we rushed backstage to congratulate her. "You are amazing, Gina," I exclaimed, pulling her into a tight hug. "Thanks, Lydia. I felt so free up there," she said, her face glowing with happiness. My mother approached, her expression a mix of pride and frustration. "You did well, Gina," she said, her voice lacking the enthusiasm I had hoped for. "Mom, she was incredible," I interjected, unable to hold back my feelings. "She danced for herself, and that's what matters." My mother's eyes narrowed, and I could see the conflict within her. "I just want what's best for her," she said defensively. "But what's best for her is to enjoy what she loves without the pressure of perfection," I replied, my voice steady. "We need to support each other as a family, not tear each other down." Gina stepped forward, her voice strong. "Mom, I want to dance for me. I don't want to feel like I have to be perfect anymore." The room fell silent, and I could see the realization wash over my mother's face. For the first time, she seemed to understand the impact of her words and actions. I didn't realize how much pressure I was putting on you," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I just wanted you to succeed." "We all want to succeed, but we also want to be happy," I said gently. "We need to find a balance." My mother looked at each of us, her expression softening. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you feel like you weren't enough. I just wanted the best for you." Gina stepped forward, her eyes shining with tears. "I love you, Mom. I just want to dance for me." My mother pulled her into a tight embrace, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It was a small step, but it felt monumental. We were finally beginning to understand each other. As we left the theater that night, I felt a sense of hope blossoming within me. We were no longer just a family defined by expectations. We were a family united by love and support. In the weeks that followed, things began to change. My mother made a conscious effort to support Gina's passion for dance without imposing her own expectations. She even attended a few of my business workshops, showing interest in my dreams as well. Gina continued to dance, but now she did it for herself, finding joy in every performance. Sophie began exploring her own interests, and I felt a sense of pride watching my sisters grow into their own identities. As for me, I finally took the leap to launch Carter Creations. With the support of my sisters and Aunt Miranda, I began to build my design studio, and it felt exhilarating to pursue my dreams. We had redefined our family dynamics, and it was a beautiful transformation. We learned that love and support were far more important than perfection, and together, we were stronger than ever.